This video reviews Section D of the 2020 Election Administration and Voting Survey, or EVES. This section seeks to understand in-person voting and polling operations in the 2020 general election. You can find similar presentations for the other 5 sections of the survey on the EVES portal and the Election Assistance Commission website. As you watch this video, you might want to follow along with the PDF version of the survey, which can be found on the Downloads page of the EVES portal. Section D of EVES asks about in-person voting and polling operations in the 2020 general election. You'll report a few types of data. First, how many people voted in person for the November 2020 election? Second, how many precincts did your jurisdiction use? Third, how many polling places did your jurisdiction use? Finally, how many poll workers did your jurisdiction use for this election, and what were the characteristics of those poll workers? As you answer these questions, keep in mind that all people who cast a ballot in person should be recorded in this section. If your jurisdiction allows in-person absentee voting, that is considered in-person early voting for purposes of EVES. There are some states that can't differentiate between absentee ballots delivered by mail or cast in person. If this is the case in your jurisdiction, please note this in the comments sections of the relevant questions. In addition, people who cast a provisional ballot at their polling place will be reported in Section E. Lastly, the 2018 EVES had an additional question in this section on the total number of votes cast for that election. This question has been removed for 2020, and as a result, the questions in this section have been renumbered. The first question in Section D asks you to report the number of people who voted in person at a physical polling location. You'll report the number of in-person voters who voted on Election Day in D1A, and you'll report the total number of in-person voters who voted at an early voting location in D1B. For D1A, you should not include any provisional ballots or any mail or absentee ballots that voters dropped off at a polling location. For D1B, you will not include any mail ballots that were dropped off at a polling location during the early voting period, but you will include in-person absentee voters. You can use the Does Not Apply option if your jurisdiction does not have in-person polling locations on either Election Day or during early voting. The next set of questions is about precincts and polling places. EVES defines a precinct as the geographic area to which voters are assigned according to their residential address. Some jurisdictions use the term ward or voting district instead of precinct. In D2, record the number of precincts your jurisdiction had. In D3 and D4, you'll record the number of physical polling places used for the election. This may differ from the number of precincts. For instance, if your jurisdiction assigns 2 precincts to vote in one location, that should be counted as one polling place. D3A will record the total number of physical polling places used during Election Day voting, and D4A will record the total number of physical polling places used during early voting. You'll further break down the numbers of polling places by where those polling places were located. Polling places that were located at sites that were not election offices, such as schools, community centers, and libraries, will be reported in D3B and D4B. Polling places that were located at election offices will be reported in D3C and D4C. For both questions, the sum of the B and C sub-items should match what you report in the A sub-item. You can also use the A sub-item to report the total number of polling places used and report data not available in the B and C sub-items if you cannot provide further data breakdowns. Lastly, you can report does not apply in these questions if your jurisdiction does not use in-person polling operations, either during early voting or on election day. The final set of questions in Section D is about poll workers who assisted with the 2020 general election. Your state or jurisdiction may instead use another title, such as election judge, booth worker, warden, or commissioner. However, the definition of a poll worker for EVES is a person who assists at a polling place with activities like verifying voters' identities, handing out ballots, setting up voting machines, and assisting voters. When counting the number of poll workers, you shouldn't include election observers or staff members from your election office unless they were hired specifically to serve voters in either early or election day voting. Questions D5 and D6 ask you to record the number of poll workers used for election day and early voting. If a poll worker served in both capacities, they should be counted once in D5 and once in D6. However, if a poll worker served multiple shifts during early voting, they should only be counted once in D6. Next, question D7 asks about the age of your jurisdiction's poll workers. In D7A, you will report the total number of poll workers who assisted with the 2020 general election. Please note that the numbers you recorded in D5 and D6 may not sum to what you report in D7A because some poll workers could have been counted in both D5 and D6. After reporting the total number of poll workers, you will provide the number of poll workers who fell into each of the listed age categories. Some jurisdictions have that information from poll workers' applications or from payroll records. However, if your jurisdiction doesn't collect that data, you can report data not available for D7B through D7G while still providing the total number of poll workers in D7A. In this question, you should only report does not apply if your jurisdiction does not use any poll workers to support any in-person voting for the 2020 general election. The last question concerns how easy or difficult it was for your jurisdiction to recruit poll workers for the election. This is a multiple choice question that will ask you to select one option that best fits your jurisdiction. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. We encourage you to carefully read through each section before answering any of the questions to ensure you're accurately reporting your data. A PDF of all EVES questions is on the downloads page of the EVES portal. We also encourage you to use the comment boxes for each question to provide us with additional information and context. This will help us analyze and report your data accurately. If you need additional assistance with anything related to EVES, please don't hesitate to contact us at eavs@forsmarshgroup.com. Thank you, and we appreciate your time and your contributions to the 2020 EVES.